All right, so this right here is the params hash. And so you may have wondered, well, why is it if we did params of user that we weren't able to create a new user? Because that's how you initialize users, with a hash like this, right? And the answer is that it's really insecure to allow this sort of submission through the web, because if you had other attributes here, suppose that you used a command line client or used JavaScript to alter the form so that, for example, you could put in another attribute, say an administrative flag that indicates whether a user is an admin or not, which we'll actually do later in this tutorial. If we allowed that sort of submission and we just built up this user using the params hash, then potentially anybody could, say, become an admin of a site, which is terrible. It's a terrible security hole. So this used to be allowed by default in Rails, and there was a way around it, but it's really good to be secure by default. As we saw, for example, with the show page, it's really good that it escapes this information, that Rails escapes out any special characters in here by default. And similarly, it's a really good idea for this to be an error by default, which it is. We saw this, that's what the forbidden attributes refers to. So what we need to do is tell Rails explicitly that these attributes are okay, these ones here, use the name, email, password, and confirmation. And the way we do that is with two special methods called require and permit. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in here user params. This is just a convention. We're going to create a method that returns the parameters that we want to allow. This is not used anywhere through the web, so we're going to make it private. And it's a really good idea, I think, to put a level of indentation here. I think the editor is actually going to complain about this, but I think it's a good practice. I'll tell you why in a moment. So params. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell Rails which parameters are required. In this case, this hash here, this params hash, must have a user key. Now, these are strings, but internally, once this gets through to the controller, they're actually symbols. So we're going to say params.require, require. So this form must submit a user, and that happens automatically by virtue of this. Because this is a user class, Rails knows to create a hash with symbol user. And then we want to permit the following attributes. So this is name, email, password, and the password confirmation. So let's do this. Save this. If I did this here, it's actually too long. It goes over this 80 column limit. So the reason I like to put in this extra level of indentation is because it's really easy to lose your place. And so I've had situations where, like, I'll be way down in some file and I'll add a method to the file, and then I won't know, like, why is it not working? And so I used to see people put in this extra level of indentation. I thought, that's stupid. Why would you bother with that? But then I got bitten by that several times. So the reason, if you define a method here and then try to use it, say, in a different part of the application, it won't work because it's private to this class. So anyway, this is a good practice, I think. It's not all that important, but I think it's a nice little touch. And it looks like the editor didn't complain. I thought it complained about this, but anyway. So this is a private method only used inside of this class. And here it is. We're going to call user params here, and then create a new user based on this sort of filtered version of the hash. So we're requiring user, and we're permitting these attributes. So let's see how that works. Just go back and create it again. And so you see, actually, it didn't give me an error. That something actually happened there. You may not have, don't blink, you might miss it, but here I'm submitting it. And in fact, we can see here, this is the debug information, name, email, password, password confirmation. And in fact, we can now put in the name, put in a couple of things here, and maybe just leave those blank. We can put in something here. And so you can see here, I actually have the correct data. So as I mentioned, password and confirmation do appear, so that's dangerous. But that's why it's only in development. It's actually not that dangerous, because typically users would only see their own password, but it's a bad idea ever to expose passwords. But in any case, you can see that we're now actually submitting information. This is going through the create action. So what's happening here is we're submitting it. Rails is routing it via the REST convention. So we're posting to /users. Rails knows to route that because of this here to the create action. Then we're creating a new user with user params set by this. And then what's happening here is that because the user is invalid, it's not saving it, and it's falling through to this step here, render new, and then it's rendering this page again. And one of the things you might notice is that it actually pre-fills the name and email. Rails knows not to pre-fill the password and confirmation because they're password fields right here. Because they're password fields, it blanks them out. But this is actually kind of tricky if you think about it. Like, how is this working? And the answer is that when we go just to this page, when you just go to sign up, this is being rendered. This code is being rendered based on this new user. But when we submit things, so just put in some stuff here. But when we submit this, what's happening is it's based on this user that actually does have attributes. And so you might think, well, how does Rails know to put these in? And that's because inside of new, this @user variable is now the one that's been defined here. And so it actually has the parameters from user.new user params. So what Rails is doing is pre-filling the name and email attributes, or these fields, with the attributes of the corresponding user right here, which comes from right here.